The cold rain hit the pavement as I stepped out of my vehicle outside the memorial chapel, my dress uniform stiff and heavy against my shoulders. After 15 years in military intelligence, I thought nothing could ever catch me off guard again, but standing in my hometown brought back a rush of old shadows. My grandfather, General Arthur Vance, had just passed away, and his sudden death felt like a quiet alarm ringing inside my chest. Before I could even reach the chapel steps, a sharp voice called out across the lawn and cut through the quiet, damp air. My older brother Trevor stood near the entrance holding a glass of scotch. A bitter grin stretched across his face as he scanned my uniform. He asked if the famous soldier had finally decided to honor the family with her presence. I said nothing and walked past him, keeping my focus completely steady. Inside the sanctuary, soft organ music echoed off high ceilings, while rows of mourners sat in uncomfortable silence. A large portrait of my grandfather rested beside the casket, displaying his decorated service record and sharp, stern gaze. However, my eyes immediately picked up the details that ordinary civilians would completely miss. 3 men in immaculate suits were positioned near the front pews, their eyes constantly scanning every door and corridor like active covert operatives. My husband Nathan leaned toward me and asked why I looked so tense during the service. I placed my hand over his and whispered that we needed to leave the building right away without creating a scene. We stood up smoothly and exited through the side doors, keeping our pace deliberate and unhurried. Once we reached the car, my heart was pounding as I pulled out my secure satellite phone to initiate an encrypted communication channel. 3 months before his unexpected death, my grandfather had called me late at night with a warning that sounded almost surreal. His voice had been low and steady as he mentioned a classified Cold War operation known as Project Peregrine. He told me that someone in our family was trying to sell reactivated intelligence, files on the black market for digital cash. He urged me to watch Trevor closely and search his workshop if anything ever happened. The morning after that alarming call, news arrived that my grandfather had died peacefully in his sleep from apparent natural causes. Knowing his disciplined lifestyle and perfect health records, I knew deep down that his death was not an accident. I drove to his estate 3 days before the funeral to search his private workshop behind the main house. Inside a hidden floor compartment, I found an old safe containing heavily edited duplicate document files. Someone had already broken into the workshop and replaced the original classified files with sloppy photocopies. However, my grandfather was far smarter than anyone gave him credit for, leaving behind a subtle trail of clues specifically for me. Underneath his desk, a hidden lockbox held an encrypted flash drive, along with a full list of treasonous transaction logs. To my utter horror, my brother Trevor was listed as the primary broker negotiating with foreign buyers. During the post-funeral reception back at the family home, Trevor held court near the fireplace like a triumphant politician. He was boasting about fake military operations and accidentally mentioned secret details that only a classified document reader would know. I watched his fingers tremble as he raised his drink, betraying the intense terror hiding behind his arrogant posture. He knew someone was closing in on him, but he had no idea how far I had already gone. While guests mingled around the buffet table, I stepped outside into the quiet driveway and powered up my military satellite phone. I dialed a restricted federal hotline and uttered my old security clearance identifier along with the designated code phrase. I informed the officer on duty that reactivated intelligence files from Project Peregrine were actively being compromised on site. The agent confirmed the coordinates immediately and instructed us to hold our position while tactical units deployed. 10 minutes later, 4 unmarked dark sport utility vehicles pulled up along the tree-lined street. Without turning on sirens, federal agents dressed in dark suits and tactical gear filed into the house with precise coordination and calm authority. They surrounded Trevor near the living room mantel before he could even attempt to reach into his jacket pocket. The entire room went dead silent as guests backed away in total shock and complete utter confusion. My mother stood near the hallway, with her hands pressed against her mouth as agents explained the federal warrants. She turned toward me with tears streaming down her pale face, asking how I could betray my own brother like this. I looked her directly in the eyes and explained that Trevor had betrayed our entire country for personal, financial gain. I told her that protecting our grandfather legacy meant stopping a traitor before more innocent lives were lost. Later that evening, I sat in the dimly lit kitchen, while my mother wept over cold coffee. cups across the table. I pulled out my secure tablet and played an audio recording of Trevor negotiating prices for stolen government files. Hearing his arrogant voice discuss classified transactions shattered her, remaining denial completely. She finally understood that I was not acting out of malice, but out of a painful duty to preserve our family true honor. A few days later, a retired veteran named Douglas visited the house holding a rain-soaked leather folder. He had served alongside my grandfather decades ago during the original covert operations in Europe. Douglas revealed that my grandfather had spent his final months tracking the digital leaks and building an airtight case against Trevor. He handed me a handwritten note from my grandfather that had been carefully saved inside the original official file binder. In the letter, my grandfather wrote that he knew his time was short and trusted me to carry the truth forward. He apologized for placing such a heavy burden on my shoulders, but knew my military training prepared me for this exact test. Reading his handwritten words gave me a profound sense of clarity and peace regarding every difficult decision I had made. Truth often requires standing alone, but doing what is right leaves a lasting legacy that never fades. At the federal courthouse several weeks later, Trevor sat flanked by defense attorneys and armed marshals during his final sentencing hearing. The judge handed down a sentence of 32 months in federal prison based on the recovered digital evidence. Before being led away, Trevor turned toward my row and admitted out loud that our grandfather had chosen the right person to trust. His confession brought no sense of victory, only a quiet, solemn end to a long, painful ordeal. A month after the trial, I stood before a hall of newly commissioned military officers at a Leadership Academy ceremony. A young cadet raised his hand and asked whether choosing duty over family ties was ever truly worth the personal cost. I replied that I did not abandon my family, but rather refused to allow dishonor to destroy everything my grandfather built. True integrity is not about seeking applause or comfort, but about standing firm when honor demands your courage.